Hey everyone, in today's session we will going to see the vectors. Vectors are a very important concept and you going to use it very frequently in R. So what is vectors? So vectors are nothing but a sequence of data elements of the same basic types. So let's try one creating a new vector. I think we have seen this in earlier version like how we can create vectors. So let me create a vector. Now here you can see that I use this function, okay, to create the vectors, the C function or the combine function, okay, and if I press enter, it is showing the new variable x, but now it is a vector, okay, because it is containing multiple basic elements. So if you read different books, some refer this elements as members, some refer this as component, but just for information, it is the one and the same. Okay, so let's jump back. Now we have seen how we create the vectors. So numeric type vectors, the character type vector, and the most important is if you want to create a vector but without any values, you can still do it using the vector function. Now let's try to create a similar vector with no value. Okay. Okay, and you can see here it is a new vector created, and by default it is assumed that it is a logical type, and it's empty, so it doesn't contain any value. But in future you can assign it any value. Now you don't need to create it specifically most of the times, but let's say there are some functions etc which requires vector input and you don't have any vector to pass, then in that case you are going to use this function. Otherwise whenever you define or whenever there is output of a vector type, R will automatically try to create a vector for you. Now we have seen the different types, okay, when we have seen the basic types, and similarly using the same type you can create a different vectors, okay, of a particular type. If you don't remember it, please do visit the earlier video, basic data types in R, okay, to get more info on this different data types. Now, the next concept is mixing of types. So, if you remember the definition of vector, it said that it is of a base, all the components are of the same basic type. Okay, so either they can be logical type, or they can be a numeric type, or they can be a character type. But you cannot have a mixture of them in a single vector. Now here, if you try to see that there are different types of values are tried to pass. So first is maybe the integer, then double value, then true, and then a text. But at the last, if you see what is a type, it would be always type character. So let's try to see adding a different types into together to see what is the result. Okay. So let me try to create again a vector x. Okay, it will just overwrite the earlier one. Okay. Now, now in this case, I'm using it as a integer. Okay, so one. You remember that if you want to create any vector of an integer type, then you have to always give it as a L at the end, and then a double value. And now, if I see what is the class of this vector, it's a numeric. Okay, and if you see what is a type, it would be always a double type. Okay. Now let's try to combine numeric and a character type. So I create another variable vector. it's a character type. Okay, and if I try to combine maybe a true false with, okay, what do you think? What would be the output? It's numeric type. So if you remember earlier, we discussed that whenever there is a true or a false type, it is automatically internally converted into zeros or one. So you can see here wherever there is a true, it is converted into one, and wherever there is a false, okay, it is converted to zero. Now, convergence of vectors. Now, sometimes you need to the vector into a different type. So, let's say you have a 1, 2, 0 as a values inside one vector, but you need it as a logical type. You can convert it using the as functions. I think we have seen the as and is function when we have seen the basic data types. So it is this is the same there we have applied on a specific variables, but now you can apply same to the vectors and the output would be as per the logic. Now here the one important thing is that to remember is that not all types are convertible. So if you are trying to convert a text into numeric type, it won't work. Okay, it would return a NAs, that is because it is not possible for him to convert the text into any specific integer. Now maybe we will just try to convert now this z, okay, which is of numeric type, into a logical type. So uh, I create a logical vector, okay, and I convert as logical. Okay, and the Z, which is now containing the different numbers. Now let's see what will be the output. Okay, and you can see here the logical vector. Okay, if I just type logical vector. Now you see here the true is that is the value of Z, that was 1, that has been converted true. Then as we have seen, the zeros are converted into false, and the 1 into true, and then the last 5 into true. So if you remember in earlier also we have discussed when we convert, okay, the logical types are converted as follows, like whenever there is a value 0, it will be treated as false, whereas any value above 0 is always considered as a true value. Now vector properties. So every vector exhibits two definite properties. One is type of, that we have seen to identify which is the type of a particular variable, or here it is a type of vector. And then the second is the length, which actually returns how many components are there in a particular vector. So let's try out with our vectors. So let's try to find out how many first what is the type of, okay, and then pass on the vector name, okay, and it's a logical type. Okay, similarly if I try to see using type of and class X, okay, it's a double. You remember we have seen this in basic types, okay, double and the integer, what is the difference? Okay, and then let's see what are the how many objects are there. So here let's try to find out how many objects there in the our vector, logical vector. Okay, it's a 7. If you count it manually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, similarly let's try to find out in how many are there uh, in vector x. Okay, there are 3. So 1, 2, and 4.5. So if you just type it, you can see here 1.0, 2.0, and 4.5. They are the three components inside the our vector. Now, lastly, we will try to see one of the important concept is setting up the names. Now, each member of your vector can be represented by names. This is very useful whenever you have different random values and you wanted to store some values with a particular tag. Okay, you can use this function. So there are three ways by which you can create a named vectors. Okay, the first one is while defining the vector itself, you give it the name and then the value as shown here. Okay, so I can directly then refer a particular component using the that label that I have used. Then the second way that I like much is the using the name function. Okay, where you define your vector first, and then once again using this name function, okay, you pass on your vector name and then you pass on the another vector which contains the respective labels. This will be also converted into a name vectors and it will behave in the same way. Now the last one, okay, this is using the set name function. So while defining the vector itself, you can use this function set names. Then you first pass on the values and then the the text or the labels for your vector. So here you can see I tried to create of three values and then I passed on the three text values. Okay, so it is as per your preference, whatever way you want to go. Okay, you can use it. Now let's try to create it one by one. So let's start by creating the first function, okay, where we pass on the label and the text. So I create a new variable, new vector, okay, var1, and now I give it value. So let's say a is equal to 1 and then b is equal to 2. Okay, remember that don't try to make a spelling mistakes here. Okay, and now if I try to see var1, okay, now it's showing 1 and 2. A is 1, b is 2, and here you can see now this var1 is defined as a named, okay, and with the numeric type. Okay, it shows the values, but remember that this is a variable with a name vector. Now you see a basic difference here. Okay, like when it was a normal vector, okay, this index was printed, but when you created a name vector, the value is printed with a particular names. So that is a little bit difference that you have to remember. Now let's use the name function to convert already existing variables. So now you see here the x has already has three values, and now I will try to give them the names. Okay, so I have to pass on the variable name, sorry, the vector name, and then once again and now I give them x, some text to refer them, and now you can see here the x is automatically converted into a name vector. Okay, and then if I wanted to refer a particular value of x, so I wanted to find the for the vector x, what is the value for the position x. And here you go. So remember one thing, you have to pass the value in a quotes like this. Okay, if you just try to pass it x and y, it will throw error. Okay, so okay, now here you see, it has shown NNA because y is a variable, okay, which contains four different values. Okay, Now this is very important, to refer one vector into another vector, okay, to get the values. We will see this in this interesting topic in upcoming videos. But for example, if you let's say there is already a z variable is also there, okay. So okay, for var1, let's try var1, okay, and I find out the value of a, it will return 1, and if I give it as only a, it will throw error saying that object a not found. Okay, but let's say we create a variable a with some values, okay, and if we pass, then it will try to retrieve the values. Now then we will now see the last function, set names. So uh, I'm creating another vector using, but now using the set names, okay, and then I created 1 to 4, and then I have to pass on the four different distinct values. Okay, so this is just about just introduction about vectors. We will see it more in details in upcoming videos. Okay, if you have any comments or if you have any questions, please write it in below comments, and I will try to reply on that. Thanks, everyone.